don't think your bladder is the problem. I think it's just a messenger. For an entire year, the only two foods that didn't leave me in burning, excruciating pain were raw zucchini and sauerkraut. I was in the bathroom 15 times a day with barely anything coming out. I couldn't ride the train to work. I couldn't be intimate with my partner. I was terrified of eating, and I was embarrassed all the time. I had interstitial cystitis, also known as painful bladder syndrome. And every doctor told me the same thing. This is your life now. You'll learn to manage it. And here's a shelf full of drugs to try to dull the pain. Now, I refused to accept any of that. And when I finally found the real cause of my pain, it wasn't even in my bladder. Today, more than a decade later, I'm completely symptom-free and I eat whatever I want. My name is Dr. Amelia Cohn. I'm a licensed naturopathic doctor. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I healed my IC at the root, why almost every treatment looks in the wrong place, and the one system in your body that's usually driving the pain. Stick with me because by the end, you'll understand your bladder in a way that most doctors have never explained. If you have interstitial cystitis, you've probably been handed the same playbook I was. Cut out citrus, coffee, and spicy food. Take a pill and brace yourself because this is a condition you will manage for the rest of your life. But IC doesn't just cause physical pain. It quietly reorganizes your entire life around a bathroom. You stop taking even short trips or car rides. You map every route by where the restrooms are. You turn down dinners, trips, dates, meetings, anything that puts you more than a few minutes from a toilet. You start to dread food because the wrong bite means hours of burning. And underneath all of this is a slow, creeping certainty that your own body has turned against you, and it's never going to stop. That certainty had almost swallowed me whole. I genuinely started to wonder if I'd end up in adult diapers. I was mourning the life I thought I'd lost, and I felt like my body had betrayed me. Even though I ate well, I exercised, I drank plenty of water. And here's the part no one warns you about. When every authority in a white coat keeps repeating, "This is just how it is," you start to believe that the problem is you, that you messed up somehow, that you're not enough, that you didn't try hard enough, and that healing just simply isn't on the table. Those beliefs are the real disease, and once you accept them, you stop looking for the truth. When my symptoms started, I thought I was experiencing a routine bladder infection, so I treated it the way I always had. Nothing worked. And I started to get scared, so I went to my primary care doctor who sent me to a urologist. That's the specialist, the person who's supposed to have the answer. The urologist handed me a printed list of foods that I needed to give up: citrus, spicy foods, caffeine, tomatoes, alcohol. The list went on. And then she gave me a prescription for a pill, and all it did was turn my urine bright orange. Now, I followed the diet to the letter, and I gave up everything on that list. I took the pill, but none of it touched the pain. So I went back, and the message that I received was the same. This is just how it is now. We've got a lot of drugs to try, and we'll do another one until we find one that works. There was no curiosity about why a healthy woman in her 30s suddenly had a bladder on fire or what had changed in my body before that. They were treating the symptom and hoping to mute it. And when my symptoms ignored the treatment, the plan was more of the same. At the same time, I was in a relationship that I didn't yet recognize as toxic. And looking back, that was absolutely part of the problem. I was pissed, and I was not acknowledging it. My body was holding far more than a bladder problem, and nobody was looking at the whole picture. I remember sitting in my car after one of those appointments thinking, this is it? This is the best modern medicine has for me. And something in me refused to accept this pain, the fear, and the confusion as my new way of life. So I just kept looking. But this is the trap that the entire IC playbook is built on. You can follow every bladder rule perfectly, the diet, the pills, the procedures, and still be in agony because you're just treating the messenger instead of the message. The bladder pain was never the disease. It was a signal. It was a smoke detector screaming that something upstream was on fire. And as long as everyone kept trying to silence the alarm, nobody walked down the hall to find the actual flames. Now, if you take just one thing from this video, let it be this. Your bladder is talking to you, and the conversation almost always starts somewhere you haven't been told to look. Now, I don't even remember how, but I found my way to a naturopathic doctor, and within the first few minutes, she did something no one else in a white coat had done. She actually listened to me. I described the pain and the urgency, the 15 trips a day to the bathroom, and instead of reaching for another drug, she got quiet and she asked about my gut. What in my digestion? And what had been going on? Anything unusual that had happened in the last year before the bladder pain started? And that's when it clicked. About a year before my first bladder flare, I had a nasty bout of food poisoning. And I had just written it off because I got better after a few days. It was agony, but I got better. But to her, this was the beginning of the story. And then she explained that the bladder rarely acts alone, that its lining and the lining of the gut are far more than what they're taught in conventional medicine. And that in a lot of women, the bladder is just the loudest member of that group. And then she said the sentence that changed my life. I don't think your bladder is the problem. I think it's just a messenger. So we did a test. It was a lactulose breath test. And there it was, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And this was set off by food poisoning a year earlier. Now that overgrowth was driving the inflammation that kept surfacing as bladder pain. And SIBO can be tricky because healthy foods tend to set it off. It also looks a lot like IBS, bloating, constipation, or diarrhea. Now, in fact, some research suggests that as much as 84% of IBS cases are actually SIBO. Conventional medicine has even quietly conceded the link, handing out the same drug that we use to treat SIBO, which is rifaximin, for IBS. But they only hand out the drug and they don't do the lifestyle changes that prevent symptoms from coming back. And here's why that matters so much for anyone with IC. If the overgrowth that drives IBS can also be a driver of bladder pain, then a huge number of women who have been told they have an incurable bladder condition may actually have something in the gut that's genuinely treatable. That was true for me, and now I see it constantly in practice. It gets missed because conventional medicine is trained to think in silos. You've got your urologist for the bladder, but your body never got that memo. It's one connected system. And inflammation in your immune system doesn't respect the boundaries between specialties. So here's the mechanism. Bacteria are not supposed to live in the small intestine. When they do, they ferment carbohydrates, onions, garlic, wheat, pasta, apples, and they create gas that gets trapped in the small intestine, thus you're bloating. They also produce metabolites called LS, lipopolysaccharides. These are intensely inflammatory molecules that make the gut wall permeable. This is what you've probably heard called leaky gut. Now, LPS is the same stuff that causes sepsis, also known as blood poisoning. So just imagine if you have this constant leak of LPS into your system, and you can drive symptoms far beyond just painful bladder. Hello, my POTS people, but that's going to be a whole nother video. Now, once the gut is leaky, these food particles slip into the bloodstream and trigger the immune system. Your immune system reacts by releasing histamine through cells called mast cells, and your bladder's inner lining is packed with mast cells. So when your immune system gives the signal, now sit with that for a second because it rewrites everything. That burning in your bladder can be a downstream reaction to something you ate 12 hours earlier. Those food particles leaked through an inflamed gut, triggering your immune system and setting off the very same histamine-releasing cells that line your bladder wall. That delay is one of the things that makes the bladder pain feel random and why the standard icy diet feels like whack-a-mole. A generic list of bladder irritants cannot capture the foods uniquely inflaming your gut or address why your gut became so reactive in the first place. So, you end up cutting out more and more foods. Your world shrinks, and you're still in pain. So let me walk you through exactly what we did because this is where everything turned around for me. And it's the same formula my 6-month foundational bladder reset program is built around. The plan had 4 parts. The first, we figured out what was feeding the fire. I did a food sensitivity test. So instead of guessing from a generic avoid citrus list, I knew precisely what foods my immune system was reacting to. And some of them were honestly shocking. Spinach, strawberries, peaches. Very sad about that. And these healthy foods that I ate every day were actually causing my symptoms. Now, while my gut healed, I pulled those foods out, not forever, just long enough to stop pouring fuel on the fire. Second, we cleared the overgrowth. I did a medically supervised GI cleanse and followed a structured elimination diet for about 3 months. And this starved out what was left of that bacteria and gave my gut lining a chance to repair. Third, this is a step a lot of people skip. We rebuilt. We added probiotics strategically, and here's the important piece, a prokinetic. This is a motility agent that helps the intestines start moving normally again, and it's one of the biggest keys to keeping SIBO from coming back. Now, that deserves a whole separate video, so keep an eye out for that one. And the fourth thing was pelvic floor therapy. It helped release that my body was still holding from old relationships and trauma from decades earlier. It also relaxed the pelvic floor muscles that were feeding some of the urgency. Now, on its own, it wouldn't have been enough, but part of the whole plan, it was powerful. And I would encourage any woman with IC or a history of sexual trauma or a history of childbirth to explore it. When it's approached as a sacred medicine, it is about so much more than just releasing tight muscles. Now, once the overgrowth was cleared and the inflammation settled, I slowly reintroduced the foods I had cut out, one at a time. The foods that used to send me to the bathroom in agony did nothing. No pain, no flare. I still paid attention to every trip to the bathroom because part of me was still bracing for that burn that never actually came. And my bladder was relaxed. No urgency, no burning, no pain. The moment it really hit me that I was free, it wasn't dramatic. It was so ordinary. And that was one of the things that made me cry. I was out to dinner with friends, and someone had passed me a plate of food I would have never touched a year earlier. And I just ate it. There was no calculating where the nearest bathroom was. I wasn't bracing for pain or burning that night. There was no fear. I remember sitting there and realizing that I hadn't thought about my bladder in weeks. For a whole year, my entire world had shrunk to the size of a bathroom. And now here I was, present and laughing and eating and just living my life. My symptoms didn't just improve, they stopped. More than a decade later, they have never come back. and I don't live on a restricted diet or plan my life around bathrooms, healing gave me back my spontaneity, my confidence, relationships, and a sense that my body was on my side again. That's why I couldn't heal quietly and move on. I went back to school and I became a naturopathic doctor because I couldn't stand the thought of another woman spending a year eating zucchini and being told her pain is permanent when the answer might be sitting just one little system over, completely treatable. So here's what I want you to take away, because it's bigger than one condition. Once you see the body as one connected system, the whole idea of a life sentence begins to fall apart. Chronic symptoms, bladder pain, bloating, food reactions, fatigue, these are not your identity and they're not your future. They are signals pointing upstream. When you stop silencing the signal and start following it to the root, you don't just manage the loss of your life more comfortably, you actually get your life back. And I know because I'm living it. But here's the deeper connection that most women with IC are never told about. How might SIBO, immune dysregulation, autoimmunity, and bladder pain all be connected? Understanding the relationship between these conditions may completely change how you think about what's driving your symptoms. And that's exactly what I break down in my next video. So if you want to be notified when that video is live, do all that great YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. It helps the channel reach more women just like you. Peace.